Okay, ladies and gentlemen and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. I forgot where my camera was. Hello. Today we're talking about Zenithar. He's the last one. He's the last one on the list. So we're going to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me today are...
I am James, also known as Aramithius.
I am John, also known as Sifri.
If you forget his name, it's right there, big and brassy and bold.
It's very hard to miss.
So just the two of us. So, where to start about Zenithar? Well, there's not much. The problem that Zenithar has, I think, in the games is that there's not a whole lot of game mechanics built around him. He's depending on where you it's an enantiomorph. John, you're the witness. Depending on where on where he's worshipped, Zenithar is he's the guy with the anvil. Zenithar is the god of commerce, or I think it's either Zenithar or Zen, depending on what we're talking about.
Yep.
And in both, it's Zen for the Bosmer, and I think depending on, I think for both the Imperials and the Bosmer, he's basically just a trade god. Right?
For the Bosmer, he is the god of payment in kind, which there's also a fascinating little snippet that I want to get to at some point. That's saying, if I can actually find it on the fly, that's saying that Zen is ostensibly an agriculture deity, but sometimes proves to be an entity of much of a higher cosmic order. There's little glimmers of something there, which I want to get to, as to what all that might mean.
He's also a warrior god. If we're looking at, like, the Bretons consider Zen to be a warrior god, and he seems to sort of have that kind of martial relationship with the Bosmer, as James was probably alluding to, maybe.
Not quite, but we'll get to that.
Okay. I would actually argue that Soon is one of his mirrors.
Yes.
Who is also a warrior god. So.
And it's also dead.
Yes,
Arctic. I that's what I've heard, that Zen might have been, or Zenithar might have been, a mortal in the past. But do you guys know anything about that? Because I'm real fuzzy on Zenithar in general.
I haven't found anything about it.
No, I've not seen anything there. But you're right that he's got to have kind of been something else before. I can't remember where MK said it. It might have been in passing in the Lorcan cast. But Zenithar is not one of your kind of primal force deities at all that you would associate with the kinds of cultures you get in Tamriel. So he's got to come from somewhere else.
Possibly, although, and this is something that Kirkbride has complained about, and I do often, is that the gods in the Aedra are sometimes a little broad, and Zenithar was one of them that he was not broad enough. That Zenithar's scope as a trade god is a little specific. And because when you think about it, like, the idea behind the Aedra on paper, in a very broad sense, is that they're supposed to be the pillars of reality that allow, or they're supposed to be the pillars of attributes, sort of, that allow reality to exist. So it makes sense for you to have a pillar of time, and a pillar of space, and a pillar of the sky or something, or a pillar of magic, or a pillar of war, or a pillar of peace or something, and and love and hate. All of these things make sense, but the problem is that they don't generally speaking, when you have, at least in the real world, very primal creation myths, the gods don't get complex enough to be like, this is the god of fair trade. It doesn't, like, that doesn't really, like feed into the thing, unless, if you were world building a race or a culture, I should say, a culture that is incredibly, like, I mean, like, so trade oriented. They're like, what are they? The from Star Trek.
The Ferengi.
The Ferengi, yeah. I mean, you'd have to be really trade oriented to be like to have a god of trade when you've got other gods that are supposed to be literally creating, so if you talk about like the 8 Aedra as the building blocks of reality, you get these weird things like, why do we have a god of love and a god of also love? Like, you know, why do we have these, you know, why do we have these contradictions? Why do we have this overlap, etc.? And thank you, sir. And when do you have a god like Zenithar, the first thing that comes into my head from a world building and mythological like construction perspective is that this used to be a god that was the god of, I guess you could call it fair play, the god of justice, you know, which when you're talking about early mythology tends to, you know, recommend or tends to harken back to ideas like fairness, fate, you know, trying to do the right thing not because it's the right thing, but because you're afraid of consequences, basically. So you end up in a lot of very primal gods that way, and then it's certainly possible for me to make that leap into thinking that a god of fairness evolved culturally to the god of fair trade, you know?
Although also the god of mercy, which is potentially why Stune and Sun are constantly changing places, because they share that root overlap.
Yeah. And speaking of that god of justice, etc., like Roman numeral is pointing out in chat, it's easy to, like, you get these phrases in like varieties of faith that say he's the god that will always win. It like that sort of just reinforces that idea of a god of fairness and justice and inevitability, and everybody gets theirs and you get what you deserve kind of thing. Therefore, when the Imperials, who are supposed to be a very trade-oriented culture, worship Zenithar as a god of trade and a god of economics and production and in some cases farming or just trade skills, I guess. He's the god of trade skill grinds. It sort of starts to make a lot of sense that Zenithar would be worshipped by the empire that way, as considering how like money oriented the Imperials are supposed to be. You know?
Yeah.
But,
plus, if you think about it from the Imperial point of view, then I'd imagine the Nibonese are the ones that have kind of keyed into it, and the amount of cults and religious ferment that they've probably been through however many iterations off the record.
Sure.
To get to something advanced as a god of trade, as well.
It's a good point. Yeah, because they're a culture that adapts a lot of gods and shifts a lot of gods is going to have fairly specific, air quotes, custom gods, and I can't help but think about every time I mention the Imperial city was originally referred to as the city of 1,000 cults.
Yeah.
And you can't kind of think about an environment like that without also thinking about the Red Guard propensity to collecting and making up gods for just about goddamn everything. I mean, you know, it's the Daedric god of inconveniences all over again, which is a great thread. But I don't... This is definitely one of those, oh God, look at what the text is doing. This is definitely one of those circumstances where we've got kind of another god in the Imperial scope that doesn't really fit in traditional world building, in traditional mythology. So you just have to sort of make up stuff.
Yeah. Although there are some really interesting links that I found poking around with. Again, because we don't have an awful lot to go with apart from that link in Varieties of Faith, but you look at the different cultural incarnations of Zenithar, and you've got some. I wound up linking him to Saturn at the end of it all. In terms of the real world, yeah, ostensibly an agricultural deity, which Saturn is associated with the seasons and so on. Worship dies out, and dead god and connections to death, etc. That is kind of where I saw him going as a kind of a real world analog, which is just bizarre when you think about how he's kind of how he's portrayed as the god of trade, if he's portrayed at all. There's ideas and currents there that aren't really brought up anywhere. That I think just gives Zenithar just these little glimmers of something else that could be, but I don't know whether we have seen anyone anywhere develop him in any particular way, which is a mild shame. But there are the seeds there. But yeah, and the kind of the larger cosmic force that we were talking about that is in Varieties of Faith again. You were talking about economics and so on. What I was thinking is being got at there is the idea of the invisible hand and that sort of thing. That he's part of some kind of cosmic order, in that the market will always out.
It will, but I can't remember who said it. The market will always balance itself, but we'll all be dead by the time it happens.
Yeah.
I can't remember who said that. Yeah.
So again, we have trade and death.
Yay.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, Zenithar. I mean, there hasn't been unlike Mara, there hasn't been a game mechanic based on Zenithar that God of the house always wins. Yeah, something like that. But what is interesting is the if Zenithar, I'll put it to you this way: if you take a higher order of gods, not just the primal creating earth gods, but then you sort of get like, when you're doing like early Mesopotamian mythology, you've got gods of I just made the water, and gods of hey, let's make some dirt, and gods of I've got the sky handled, no problem. When you get past that early Mesopotamian mythology stuff and you start getting into the higher up, like later 1,000 years kind of things, you start getting gods of like house gods, for example, and trade gods, and you absolutely get agricultural gods. And if you have, just in a general world building sense, if you guys are trying to work on like a fictional religion or something, if there's not a god of agriculture, you've missed something. you've missed a key component of practical world building, basically, because there's no early religion, polytheistic early religion, that doesn't have a god of agriculture. It's so critically important to timing the growth of crops and getting rain on the days that you need it and no rain on the days that you don't need it. People are going to end up praying. They're going to get superstitious, and they're going to start thinking, well, I sacrificed a goat last year and some bitch if that rain didn't work, so it's time to get a goat, provider of our ease. Yeah, see, the god of merchants and middle nobility. Yeah, it's sort of, it is kind of a middle class idea of a god of, the god that rewards hard work and perseverance and justice. And yeah, so
yeah. That lovely, nice illusion that the market always works.
And that if you work hard, you'll get your rewards. And
yeah. Yeah, you'd almost see that as, well, god of merchants and middle nobility. I can see that as that's something that would wind up being preached by the middle nobility to explain why they are where they are,
Mhm.
you wind up with Zenithar being being a god of backing up the status quo.
Right.
But he's also kind of a tool, a god of hope in that sense. That you've got people who will cling to that article of faith that if they work hard, if there is toil, there will be reward.
Right.
So there's that different elements of him as well in terms of where I imagine he's worshipped. There's not an awful lot to go off in terms of what actually happens with him, but
Well, Doc seems to suggest that in the 6th era he becomes the god of capitalism. I would suggest in the 9th era he becomes the god of APIs. So, his first tenet is if you promise there will be a fetch.
Yep.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that probably the most central concept tied to all of Zen's spheres is this idea of reciprocity.
Yes.
And going further back than that, I actually have a theory that he could be related on some level to causality, in general. And
right.
When I was doing a lot of research into Zen, like preparing for this cast, something I discovered was that with karma, the original word for it they used in Sanskrit, karman, meant work, essentially, and it was tied to the idea of what probably isn't commonly practiced too often today, but the Hindu Shrauta, which is an offering of sorts, where what you offer as karman to the gods is returned to you. And in ESO, there's actually a similar idea with priests of Zenithar, where essentially one of the priests actually makes a comment that they almost seem to give up almost as much as they are getting back from Zenithar, because he's about this very equal reciprocity, right? And so we get this idea of karma, and then makes you start thinking maybe about some other things too, like the idea of what karma means in birth and rebirth. And it's interesting that Zenithar, the planet sort of like that orbits him, is actually Mara. And I also noticed when I was reading through the monomyth, in almost every single version of the monomyth, Zenithar, or one of his mirrors, is always either the 3rd or the 4th god to emerge. There's only one where he's the 4th. He's always in the exact same position as being when it talks about these early Ada that start to appear within what the Altmer would call Anuiel. So considering that, when you consider that, when you entertain the notion that Zenithar or Zen, or whatever you want to call him, might be tied to the idea of causality, you have to consider what that means in terms of relationships. And in order for you to have someone that reciprocates back to you what you are doing or what you are giving, there has to be another person in that spot. So I think Zenithar, as an idea, is a predecessor to the idea of relationships themselves, and that's how you get Mara. And then you have Dibella orbiting Mara. So Zenithar's existence is what is required in order for Mara to come into being. And there's actually a direct relationship, if you look at like a lot of pantheons, between a Mara-like figure and a Zen-like figure. Like Zet and Morwa is a big example, as well as Zenithar and Kennereth, which is in this case is kind of like a mother nature type figure. And what we see, especially in a lot of these variants of Zenithar, is that he's not a very good lover at all. Like, soon drags Dibella to his tent, Shore, son of Shore, as like a reward for his doing battle. Like, I'm owed this, so he just kind of like takes. And I mean, it kind of figures that he'd be, if I recall correctly, was he? No, he's the god of trials. Stoon is the god of ransom. Yeah. And then with Zet, it does say that he was abandoned by Tall Papa, and that's supposed to be an explanation for why the lands are dry and desolate. But in ESO, we get this idea that it's his tears in a way that are fertilizing Morwa. So he just chooses to abstain altogether, and that's causing the land to just be shit in a lot of places. And it's actually Zeki, his daughter, that is the one that brings the rain, that allows the land to be fertilized. So what you have is a figure that the goddess of that is required to exist for the goddess of love to exist, but because he is a god of reciprocation, he's not able to actually willingly give love of his own will. He's only able to react based on what is done to him. So he's a very terrible father.
Yeah, hearing it presented like that, and particularly if he's typically the third deity to be formed, does that mean that we have a god of the Enantiomorph here?
Well, what are the first and second?
Yeah, you've got Akatosh and
Lorcan.
And Lorcan is the second. Yes,
I do think he's related to the Enantiomorph because Dibella is what's orbiting Mara. So when you consider that you have Zen and then you have Mara reacting to him, and you have Dibella as a result, it is kind of like father and mother producing a child.
And the Enantiomorph is an exchange.
Well, yeah. Also, if you consider if Akatosh and Lorcan are the alpha and omega of the Enantiomorph, the witness, if it's Zenithar, is going to be the one that's concerned with outcomes.
Yeah.
So if you interact, there's going to be a result. And Zenithar, being the god of fair trade, is going to say, if you, buy the ticket, take the ride. He's going to say, if you do it, if there's an action, there's going to be a reaction, and that's sort of his lesson, kind of. I'm particularly interested in two tarot cards when I'm thinking about this, which would be there's two. The one that I'm less familiar with because it's very complex is the Lovers, which is a card that speaks about solution and coagulation, is what they call it in alchemy. And it's the idea of production. Like if you take ingredients, you will produce a result. If you take the right ingredients, you will produce the right result. If you take the wrong ingredients, you'll produce the wrong result. It's very much the same thing with the idea of Zenithar saying that he's the, maintaining that he's the god of consequences, basically. If you pay the right amount of money, you'll get the thing that you want. If you act like a punk, you're going to get slapped. It's sort of the same thing. The second one is adjustment, or in other structures, it's called justice. And unfortunately, in the Crowley guide, there's not really a whole lot of time spent on justice, because I think, in my rather dim opinion of Crowley, I think he just didn't really get along with the idea very much.
Yeah,
but somebody wants to stall for time, I'll just do the more traditional one.
Yeah, I would actually almost contradict you there from something that comes up in one of ESO's maps, that Zenithar isn't necessarily about results in some ways, or at least according to this interpretation. It's kind of it talks about work hard and you will be rewarded, and rewarded how. Then it goes on to talk about precisely how, and then it just develops that theme by saying that there is always a reward, regardless of the material result or lack thereof. And the end of the line is, or the end of this section is, by participating in creation, your actions are blessed. The reward that Zenithar wishes for us to discover is in the work itself, hidden in the very act of making. And the fruits of your labor are lesser prizes when compared. So the greatest prize of Zenithar is getting something that is not a result. And going towards something that's just a process, which I'm sure is going to ring bells as well.
Mm.
Which will go towards Crowleyan love in that particular sense as well.
Well, yeah, and the somewhat more typical interpretation of justice is, well, let's just say, let me put it to you this way: I forgot it almost the instant I read it.
Right. That insightful.
I would go so far as to say that Zen as an idea is tangentially related to the incalculable effort talked about in Sermon 35 and other parts of the sermons, just because when you see the incalculable effort mentioned, it's always talking about a joining of a pair,
Right.
similar to Mara and Zen getting together. But the thing with an incalculable effort is, if you look at it, say, from Zenithar's perspective, he acts in a way that he will always get his action and reaction to himself. But when you consider something as incalculable, that you can't calculate it, then you can't really know that you're going to get back what you are giving.
Okay, I think you've got it. Yeah.
Does tie into the idea that concludes in Sermon 35, that's easier to kiss the lover and then become one, which that can go a whole bunch of other. I know that's a whole other can of worms, though, because that leads into other craziness that has nothing to do with Zenithar, but I thought I'd just share that. I'd just share that thought.
Well, how far can we stretch Zenithar? Let's go.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about the interaction of two opposites, you basically just the whole of the 36 lessons becomes completely fair game, and you can you can reference literally any sentence in it and stretch that sumbitch to hit that that thing. I know I've got a whole fucking website that does that. But in the case of incalculable effort, one of the reasons why it's incalculable is because it's, I suppose you could say that there's a difference between physically infinite and practically infinite, which is, so if you imagine for a moment, like, I think they do this in number theory. There's a, oh, hey, it's IFW.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, this is all kinds of screwy. It's just going to suck. That's all there is to it. I don't have time to fix this right now.
Okay.
The stream's just going to suck for a little while. My apologies.
Okay.
So, in the case of in the case of number theory in mathematics, my recollection, which is not great, is that there are effectively two types of large numbers. There's a large number that is actually infinite, that does not end. And then there's a practically infinite number, which is so gigantic that it doesn't really make any sense to try to build an equation around it, or to refer to it, or add or subtract anything to it, because it's so horkin' big. Yet, it is agreed upon by mathematicians that it is not infinite. So, I don't know exactly how to phrase this, but the idea behind incalculable effort is that but the use of the word is that you could say that it's referring to the idea of infinite work, of work that cannot be calculated because it is never ending, and the work will never finish. But I would argue that it's incalculable because it's unknowable. It is finite. It will end eventually, but you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know how much effort is required, and the key to love under will is that you shouldn't know how much effort is required. That the moment you start thinking about how much longer am I going to have to do this, you've lost the connection. Yeah. And the whole process of love under will falls apart the moment you start thinking about what you're doing. Do you see what I mean? It has to be it has to be a natural, almost not unconscious, not subconscious, but not conscious effort that you're just doing spontaneously. That's the word I wanted. It has to be a spontaneous effort for it to actually be magic, for it to be love under will. Or the moment you start thinking, if you go out and mow your lawn, which is the example I always use, and you're and you just keep your head down and you focus on the lawnmower and you focus on the grass that you're cutting and the quality of the work that you're doing, it will go faster than if you try to look up from it and look around and say, okay, how long have I been doing this? Streamers on Twitch stereotypically get very irritated when their chat asks them how long they've been streaming for, or my god, man, you've been streaming for 10 hours? Holy crap. It really bugs some streamers because their ability to be spontaneous and produce good content will be derailed by them going, oh my god, I've been doing this for 8 hours, I'm really tired. That's when they suddenly realize, oh my god, I'm beat, you know?
Yep.
It's when you're playing a video game and you feel like $1 million and everything's going really great, and then you look up at the clock and you realize it's 4 a.m, and all of a sudden you're exhausted.
When you are alienated from your labor, so to speak.
Exactly. That's when you've started to try to calculate the effort.
Yeah.
Is when you suddenly start to realize, oh my god, I've been doing this for forever. That's when you stop being able to do it.
That sort of ties back into better words than I could have ever used. That Zen is effectively not a good lover. Is kind of part of the whole thing I've been trying to get across, because he only knows how to reciprocate. He can't be spontaneous.
He's only worried. Exactly. He's only worried about what is the end result. Yeah.
Yep.
And that makes him great for a god of trade and such, but obviously it's not great for the divine will, you know.
Unless there is something to that makes Zenithar the most ideal. Just again thinking back to that excerpt of just merely by participating in creation and being in that very act of making, then your labor is blessed. Is that what Zenithar is truly about? Just the exchange is all that matters. That the mechanism is all that matters, and the doing of, which just makes me wonder: would you have some Zenithar cults start to chase zero sum? Just as a thought.
I love that.
Well, it is solid math. No one's ever going to argue against zero sum being spurious math. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, just if you are just willing to lose yourself in everything, you are blessed because you are part of creation. Going back to being part of creation because you realize that you are actually just part of creation. That all fits.
Well, that's the trick behind actual enlightenment, though, is that if you lose yourself in the act of creation, or in the awareness of reality, that's when you zero sum. The trick to love under will, similarly, is, lose yourself in the will of God, but don't lose yourself. It's the idea of being simultaneously a part of, but also it's being part of a gigantic it's being part of a gigantic whole without losing your Jesus. I'm gonna find a different word. It's about being a part of it's being a drop in the ocean, but the drop, shut up, Doc. But it's not losing perspective of the drop. God damn it. So yes, that's about as much of a stretch into Crowley territory as I can get, really. Zero sum cults would be pretty awesome. I mean, that's kind of. I mean, zero sum doesn't really get a whole lot of attention in ESO that I've found. I say that I've found because there's such a titanic amount of stuff in ESO. It's dizzying. But I mean, I don't have that what's his name's helmet yet. So I haven't done literally every quest you can get. So I don't think that, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what else we have to discuss. I mean, we've only done 35 minutes on Zenithar, but in our defense, there's not much in there.
I would argue that Zen was the core part of the complacency of Trinimac, personally. And tying into everything we were just talking about. And the fact that teaching the Outmer to cry as a result in relation to everything that has happened is not only a factor of how would I put it? The we, like as in like, the royal we tends to get used in regards to blue a lot in the series, the color of complacency and measured inevitability, and of course water. And you have the literal metaphor of water with the tears of the Outmer, and also you have the tears of Zet and Zeki, and all of that going on. And it makes a very interesting foil to Boethia, who is represented by fire, and is more ego-driven and is more about not trying to get reciprocation for the self, but more trying to take without giving. And represents more of an I in that relationship. I kind of was noticing that a lot. Thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and just more generally, because my mind is mush. I'm fairly certain that
Hit me.
I'm fairly certain that Zenithar was part of one of the component. If we think about Trinimac as a three-part god, I'm fairly certain Zenithar is part of that three, or am I totally up the wrong tree?
No, that should be correct.
Yeah. So that links in that way. But then if that's the case, then what part of the three? If we're it's just purely representing all the stuff about sundering, then yeah, that makes sense. But I was wondering if there was anything a bit more literal, in terms of how those two were linked, because Trinimac gets torn into various pieces at various points. Just wondering if I can't remember if there's anything actually about that anywhere, because as I say, my memory's not quite what it should be.
I remember. I think a lot of it actually came off of the Memospore IRC when MK just was kind of like, "Oh yeah, Trinimac's a Mithra." And then there was also mention of people talking about the Trinimac. They're thinking of it in a Gaelic sense, like the threefold sun. But of course, when you look at it in TES language, you have Tri and then Nim, like a Nimic. Trinimac, which is the three-named king.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I can't make any real connections to Zenithar off the back of that.
Trinimac is actually in Shore Son of Shore. Yeah. He is considered a mirror of Soon, almost directly stated.
Yeah. Oh yes, because there's the whole reiterated passages with everything flipped between the two. Yeah. Is Trinimac related to gifting at all? I've not seen.
No one mentioned the Bosmer.
Oh yes,
we did, but it was before you joined.
Yeah,
and
I'm like really tired. I'm like listening.
Did we dig into? Did we really dig into the differences between Zen and Zenithar at all? Does anybody want to?
It's kind of interesting because I think Zen got brought to the Bosmer by Kothringi sailors, if we're going on Varieties of Faith as pretty much the only account of how it happened, which almost suggests that trade is prior to payment in kind. That perhaps prior to the Kothringi arriving and saying, "We want to trade with you. Are you interested in these beads?" sort of thing.
Beads?
Prior to the Kothringi saying that to the Bosmer, then it's possible that they didn't have much of a concept of payment in kind as such. That which again goes back to the kind of the capitalist idea that I'm seeing trends within Zenithar now of kind of all the stages of kind of pre-capitalist egalitarian, then capitalism, and then the idea of the joy bit of the work itself and the alienation from labor, and then we get into Zenithar being a communist.
Yeah.
Because that's very, very Marxian language that we're using there.
Alienation from labor hitting home for you right now, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, congratulations, by the way. Yeah.
Actually kind of makes sense in a way.
In regards to
in regards to Zen and how he gets introduced into Bosmer culture. Because for the Bosmer, the green literally supplies them with everything. They didn't really need to go out and get anything for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah, the idea of a Bosmeri god of agriculture doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, would
would
the Bosmeri god of agriculture be the god that just says no hands off? Is that?
Did anyone talk about the that weird tidbit that was in Varieties of Fate that was also kind of touched on in ESO as well, about how Zen is also found in Akaviri mythologies as well?
It's been brought up in passing, but we haven't said what that might mean. So, but yeah, we don't. Do we? What else do we know about the Akaviri pantheons to really to know where that fits in?
Is there anything?
One new book that's included in elsewhere that actually gives us their names as like their gods that no one ever talks about. But I was just like,
okay.
Cool.
I'm always been convinced that the Akavir name drop was there to make people try to hunt down the Asian-y elements of Zen.
You think?
Yeah, well, not only that, but if you consider that in a very, very vague, not specific sense, because obviously Buddhist Zen encompasses a lot more than this, but it's a lot about harmony. And Zenithar can also be seen in regards to harmony.
Yeah. Hang on.
Well, if you take so okay, so my understanding of Zen as a concept is enough so that I understand that it's not a good idea to have a concept of Zen, but it's sort of Zen Buddhism. The concept of Zen starts to tread, from what I've read, closer to the Taoist culture of Taoism, of the Tao itself, of an unknowable pattern. And Zenithar lends himself as a god of structure and communism and Jesus, of a god of structure and capitalism and of trade. Does have little hints of the idea of the Tao being, if you are in line with the Tao, if you align yourself with the pattern of the universe, and this is very Crowley, by the way, if you align yourself with the pattern of the universe, then you have nothing to worry about. But I mean, Taoism also says that the pattern of the universe might be that you're going to get eaten by a tiger. So it's but the good news is that you don't have to worry about that your fate will happen. And in the Taoist sense, you'll reincarnate better and your karma will improve if you don't fight the inevitability of fate, basically. And you can approach similar things with Zenithar. If you take that approach with Zen Buddhism, no, I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to try it. I'm too sketchy on it. Yeah.
You could have went with the God of payment of kind being also kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to the law of equivalent exchange with that, and then with Trinimac ripping out Lorcan's heart, and then he later on loses his body as part of equivalent exchange.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't say equivalent exchange and not get me thinking about Full Metal Alchemist, but
no. Well, I also think about Full Metal Alchemist with exchange, but
I was literally just reading stuff out of the Crowley Tarot, and he mentions the card of balance and justice as being the third of the alchemical cards. So yeah, it's an interesting coincidence there.
There's no coincidences.
There are no coincidences. Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't mind saying that I actually really like Zenithar as an Aedra. I'm not really fond of gods like Dibella and Mara having this really kind of nebulous overlap. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not crazy about the directions that Trinimac takes, but I like Zenithar because because his scope lands on very primal concepts of equivalency and fate and trade, and you give me something that's valuable and I'll give you something of equivalent value back, and that is blessed by the gods. When you have interactions like that, especially in early cultures, it's sometimes necessary to bring in the wrath of gods in order to make sure that people don't screw each other. So, when somebody says, here's a gold piece, I'm going to give you this gold piece and you're going to give me that cow. And the person takes that gold piece and says, I'm going to trust you that this is an actual gold piece. And here's my cow. And then he takes the cow and the other guy goes away with the cow. And then later on you're looking at the gold and then you realize it's just plated and it's lead, or whatever. Sometimes it's very useful to avoid situations like that when you have the threat of an all-seeing god whose specialization is solely in making sure that people treat each other right. So, I mean, it makes a lot from a world-building perspective. I'm just saying it makes a lot of sense. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
It reminds me of big deal for the Bretons. I don't know. The way you describe it, the first thing I was thinking about, this is how High Rock became, so
yeah. Yeah. Here's a cow.
It would be a huge deal over there, but where's my lore for my Bretons,
I was also thinking at that point, we don't have any indication that there's anything like libations that happen in the Elder Scrolls, is there? In any context, but I think that Zenithar would kind of match that concept more than any other deity out there. That the idea of you in whatever you're doing, in whatever interactions you're making, and in trade, and you acknowledge the god and involve them in that transaction.
Well, yeah, you absolutely can end up in a situation where you start developing priests who are just like, hey, look, if you pay me a whole bucket of gold, I'll forgive all your sins and you get into heaven. I mean, equivalent exchange, right? You're helping out the church.
Yeah.
So yeah, that things can go badly there.
Yeah.
Didn't ESO debunk that? They had like a lore master archives because way back in Arena of Direfall, you can go to like the temples and like pay them to resurrect the dead and shit. And you're just like, we don't do that. What the fuck would tell you that?
Yeah.
That was never a thing.
You've been lied to, son.
They resurrected dead, but they didn't use no Aedra rituals with that. That was pure Daedra.
No, that's all Daedra. Yeah. Which is... So, but that's interesting is that, like, if you take the same approach of, primal gods of or I should say, what I want to call like secondary gods of like, where you have, the first level is like the physical gods of here's air and here's water and here's, sun and etc. And then you have like secondary gods, which are like the primal forces of culture, which is what I consider Zenithar to be a cultural god. I don't think I'm saying anything out of turn here. When you've got like secondary cultural gods, you are going to get a god of revenge. And Zenithar doesn't really seem to be dicking around with that. Zenithar is more like everybody plays fair and I'm happy. But of all the things that Daedra should be doing, I think revenge is high on that list, I suspect.
Malacath.
Yep.
Malacath? Okay, sure.
And one that came up in chat actually. The text, the Ghost of the Green, mentions Zen's Avenger, and the Ghost of the Green is acting as Zen's Avenger, whatever that might mean. So there is part of Bosmeri culture at least that's connecting Zenithar with vengeance. Not necessarily directly, but hang on. Oh no. Yep, Zen must have heard my prayers. There's a line from Selan or Kalan, however you pronounce it, his or her journal. While I was out hunting, I came upon the Ghost of the Green, the real Ghost of the Green, not that imposter the High Elves caught years ago. He gave me a set of leathers, a mask, a bow, and a quiver, and then told me to kill as I would. I can scarcely believe it, but it's true. I am the Ghost of the Green, and I will have my vengeance.
Yeah, I actually remember doing that quest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's tied to Zenithar in another text. So.
Yeah, one who is restrained and reserves in times of peace. That's a good point, Doc. I really need to fucking read King Edward, because I'm doing Sermon 22 right now, and it's all about the Ra theme and their integration into Halalu. So I think there's a the Ghost of the Green. At the time, I kind of just thought it was sort of a regional god, sort of. But I do agree that there's. I mean, No, Trinimac makes sense as a god of revenge. But Trinimac is identified dominantly as an orcish god.
Kind of. I mean,
or Malacath is what I should say. So, and Trinimac really, I mean, my guesswork on Trinimac was that Trinimac was supposed to be a warrior god in the respect of like, a more physical form of consequences, I suppose I should say. The idea of honor and respect, and also etc. And one of the reasons why I always thought that was because the teachings of Trinimac are supposed to be forbidden in Dunmer culture, or in Chimer culture, and I was trying to come up with like, why would they outlaw Trinimac? And I mean, obviously it's because Boethia kicked the shit out of them, and they love Boethia over there, but I figured it might have something to do with the idea of the teachings of Trinimac being something that being a bunch of lessons that go against the teachings of the Ashlanders and of early Chimer culture. And that's a very kind of underhanded culture, It's the early Ashlander culture is very like, live poorly, do what you have to do to survive, don't hit anything head on, and and etc. It aligns much more closely with the stereotypical idea of the dark elf fantasy trope, basically.
Although it's also Trinimac is also subservience in a way, because Trinimac is the shield thane,
right?
Not the leader. It's Trinimac is something that's about stability and social order, because they have to have that hierarchy in order for Trinimac to be the shield thane. Otherwise, Trinimac would be the one who leads because he's the strong one.
Right.
A bad king, so to speak.
Yeah.
A Malak, you might say.
I missed that.
Oh,
What now?
See, the only thing I can think about is Ebenar. Fuck.
Yeah.
Because what is that one? The Dark Spirits that was included in Elsewhere that's like has that really sneaky Ebenar reference in it, and it's like it straight up calls him a spirit of vengeance. I'm just like, fuck.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like a spirit of vengeance that has no will of its own. As it was born from Azura's grief after the death of Fatima and Lorca. None can summon this spirit save Azura, Barifa, and Mephala, for only they know its true name. It sometimes appears in songs as a Black Panther, a warrior in ebony armor, or as a hidden sword.
Azura, Boetha, and Mephala, the anticipations?
It's like a straight up, reference to the Orcish creation myth of Malacath, where Malacath was like basically ganged up on by the freak of Aedra, and they made him rip his shame from his body, and that's how he became Malacath.
Or Morlock.
Or Morlock, how they call him,
Yeah, because that is Morlock Hawkfather.
Yeah, they can't let the Bretons know they worship Aedra. His name is Moloch, not Malacath, guys. Totally different people.
Yeah, absolutely, totally different. Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Where that goes. Yeah, but that also kind of struck me. That whole kind of true name passage conversation also made me think of the Dramathra and Locage. But that's a whole other can of worms. That
also, it's really
Sith has got a good point in chat.
What was it?
AC or AK is derived from Aka to mean king. Malak therefore means bad king.
Yeah.
Yep. Just like Trinimac is the three-named king.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Doc. Pass it around tinfoil hats. Good job.
Hey, what's the?
You mean we're not
real quick? What's the What was Azura's spear again? Isn't she like kind of balanced? Not like Periites balanced, but like something else.
Yeah, just sticking her fucking nose in everybody's business. That's what her spirit is.
She's the spirit of the Dunmer people and kind of the personification of them as a race.
Yeah,
so,
it's
isn't she described as being like the dawn and the dusk, or
right?
whatever?
It's a transitions. So that was the last explanation that I was familiar with. This is probably not accurate. This is not up to date, considering ESO has had a lot to say about Azura since then. The last understanding that I had of Azura is that she was the god of transitions, which meant that she was concerned with balance. So when things get out of balance, she facilitates the transition over to the counterbalance. So she's not, if you think about it that way, she's not really a god that is concerned with the actual balance of things, but she is the god that you go to when you need a balance to be created.
Okay.
Figuring out what that balance is, that's somebody else's business. If this doesn't sound extraordinarily narrow to you, it's because it is. It's a very, very narrow idea for a god, and therefore it doesn't actually work.
Yeah. My thing was that, like, if you go with the idea that Ebenar was somehow linked to Trinimac and Zenithar or whatever, the fact that he was born from Azura's grief over Lorcan's death is very interesting. And it kind of ties, and like I said, it ties into the whole Trinimac feeling like, or everybody can guess that Trimac's whole deal is that, oh yeah, I killed Lorcan. Oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. I feel bad about it now. I'm gonna be I'm gonna fuck off into oblivion and be a fucking Daedra now.
Yeah.
Make everyone mad at me.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not
gonna kick cans around in the alleyway and fucking jerk ass jerks.
I'm not totally sold on Azura being his mom, because fuck Azura, she's everywhere.
Yeah, that lady need to mind her own damn business.
She's like Sheogorath, she's like everywhere in every fucking game.
Right.
Just fuck off for like a decent part of the franchise.
Can I have thank you. Can I just have a little bit of an expansion or something that isn't totally up Azura's asshole? That's all I want. I'm really damn tired of it. Like there was an ESO quest that was like, oh, there's a priestess of Azura has been kidnapped. And I'm like, fucking of course. And so I go and I do that, and then somebody else was talking about like worshipping Boethia or something like that, and I was like, oh, finally something interesting. And then we had like a whole expansion that, like a very large overarching plot that was about
You talking about the weird disease thing? With
no, it was Mephala trying to, this was the plot to, probably shouldn't say this on stream in case somebody hasn't played it, but to the
Somerset.
Clockwork City, I think.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Where Mephala was invading
Yes.
someone
you
else's.
got a Spiral Sky. And
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, they were button heads. And I was just really happy Azura wasn't involved. I was so fucking sick of Azura. I'm like, great. I don't know how any writer at ZeniMax can reference Mephala without talking about Vivek at the same time. I don't understand how people resist that temptation. You know, but I mean, good for them.
I mean now
stronger people than I am.
Warlock Ball, they mentioned Meridian now too, so yeah.
That's another that was also interesting that at no point or another did they not mention that Moloch Ball and Vivek have a little bit of a relationship. And I was like, you guys don't want to bring that up? You don't want to bring that up? Come on, bring it up a little.
Rated PG-13.
They only introduced the 36 lessons in Morrowind, so they couldn't weave it into anything else.
Yeah, well,
earlier on, unfortunately. But
was that the quote from MK? A group of deities that share the same designation. That's a tough idea for me to get my head around, but okay.
What?
The idea that Ebon Arm might be a group of deities that share the same designation. Many post-apocalypse manifestation of the Humding have individualized, like Diagna. Post-apocalypse. Is he when he talks about post-apocalypse? I think he's talking about post.
Yukuda, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that weird like Ebenar might be a Yukudan deity. I mean, he was worshipped in Hammerfell, but
yeah,
I wouldn't really tie him to their pantheon that much because he definitely has some Bretanism in him. I don't think the Yukudans will worship like a dude in full like stereotypical knight armor like that.
Fun thing, and this is probably going to go straight into conspiracy theory territory.
We're off the rails anyway. Let's go.
I know, right? But in Skyrim, when you fight the Ebony Warrior, he always has 6 flawless gems in his inventory that are none of them are the same type of flawless gem. And I've seen it speculated. Well, I have speculated with a confidant of mine that could refer to the 6 walking ways, and that it could be a manifestation of Ebon Arm as a god sent by the 3 good Aedra as reach heaven by violence. I just killed Rotten. I just killed him.
You mentioned Azura. That's his trigger word, man.
Yeah.
No, Bretons are my trigger word.
How can you be mad about Bretons?
Do you want a list? How much time you got?
I list too, but
I think we did a whole cast about this.
I am a known Breton apologist, so you guys are gonna you're gonna have fun with me.
I'm more than happy to be proven wrong that Bretons are boring. It just hasn't happened yet. I'm actually doing Bretons are what are they in ESO? They're which faction are they again?
Daggerfall.
They are Daggerfall Covenant. Okay, so I've got a character in Daggerfall Covenant that I'm running right now, Melidiu Hamar, whose name should sound familiar to some people, and what he's doing in the second era, don't fucking worry about it. I'm going through, like, I'm specifically going to go do a lot of Breton quests because I want to find something that is interesting to me that really gets my head sizzling, something that really like gets me excited. I really want that. I really do, because I'm so fucking sick of Bretons, dude. They're just so dull. They're just so French. They're just French, is what they are. It's just French lore is all it is. Yeah. It's just Grail lore without the Grail. That's all it is, And I'm just done. I mean,
I feel like that. Like they put the Breton cushion in pincushion aside for just a brief moment. Nah, fuck it. Just I want to say one last thing about Bretons. The fact that literally no one knows how to fucking write them. That's it.
Yeah.
That's just the honest answer to Bretons, because they're just a stereotypical piece of modern medieval fantasy that's shoehorned into Elder Scrolls, and no one know how to do anything else with it.
Yeah.
It sucks because there's so much good shit in the older games, but no one did anything with it. And now we got boring Bretons.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. They could have done a whole lot of really, really interesting stuff with that sort of like northern West European cultural stuff. Like, I mean, I know that they were basically just sort of taking French, English, what do you call Anglo-Saxon fantasy lore and or you know, it's just a Grail lore basically, and just sort of running with it, and that's fine, except. I mean, that's a fine thing to do. It's a fine lore. It's really good, but it's been done. It's not unique is what I'm trying to get at. It's not different. And it's the same reason why I don't really care for orcs very much, is because they're just a trope. And it's the same thing for Bretons. I like where ESO took orcs, because they made them very different from the tropey orcs, which is terrific. But and it's one of the reasons why I like Dunmer so much, is because they're in appearance only dark elves, and then everything else is completely different. And that's one of the things that I like about them. But in the case of Bretons, they're still just Bretons. And, I mean, they're fucking called Bretons. Nords are almost as bad, if you think about it.
To be fair, Imperials, if you go only by game portrayal, are literally just Romans.
Oh, I know, right?
And they never bring up Colovians or Nebanese, hardly ever.
Yeah, that culture just gets all sort of schwacked together into just Imperial.
It's the same problem with Bretons. They actually do have some good lore, but the portrayal of it is almost never delivered, ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Forsworn were a great idea. We talked a lot about that in the Breton cast. About the Forsworn being this extraordinarily fucking stubborn group of Bretons that also apparently don't believe in metal. I don't know what that's about. I mean, they're the Bretons of tan lines, I guess. I don't get it. And
I mean, it would be cool. We got Reachmen that weren't fucking evil for a change.
Would be good, yeah. But,
that's very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that I like the idea of the 6 walking ways thing, because if you, like I said, the whole weird Evanarm reference and elsewhere, which I don't know why the fuck they keep teasing Evanarm. They was mentioning this in USP, like they keep teasing Evanarm like he's gonna be something really important later on in the future, which is actually really cool. They actually revive him in a cool way. But why would Evanarm like have a vendetta against the Dragonborn in Skyrim? Riddle me this, John.
I don't think that it was the point of having a vendetta. I think the point was, in a very Boethian sense, that they needed you to overcome someone that was supposed to be also in a metaphorical sense at the end of their journey as well. Because the only time he appears in Skyrim is after you have you have to like, I think you have to like master, I think you had to get like a skill to 100 and then like complete the main quest or something.
It'd be level 81, I think.
Level 81. There's a bunch of stuff that you got to do. It might just be level 81, but yeah, that's still supposed to be significant. Because originally I believe level 81 was the last level that you could reach. So when you've reached the end of your journey, you are encountered by a warrior that has also metaphorically reached the end of their journey. Mm-hmm. So I think it's in the sense of, conquer someone that is like you, so that you can what's the word I'm looking for? Shit.
Shit. Perfect.
Defeat the devil who is yourself.
Yeah.
Well, it's like in Boethia's proving, right? But a bunch of worshippers
prove that you exist. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to prove that you exist by killing someone else.
Yeah. Well, you can't kill God, so you kill the king. That's the phrase in mythology is, you can't kill God, kill the king. So if you have, that it's a good one, right, James?
Yeah, but he's not the king.
No, but the idea is
he's not a great general. But...
No, he's not supposed to be. He's not a great general. You can be the king. This is the difference between a ruling king and an actual king, right? So the idea behind the Ebony Warrior was that he's supposed to be a former ruling king who's never been mentioned anywhere in lore before ever at all. So just wink wink.
Yeah.
You know, he's a ruling king, and then you defeat him, and that makes you the ruling king because a king who sees in another equivalent rules nothing. So, but that's kind of, it was a sort of an attempt, I think, to kind of close the mythological story of the Dragonborn with a mythological ending, but it was a very sort of half-assed, tacked-on attempt.
Yeah.
And it was a minimal effort, which...
Like they really wanted to build it up. They could have had you find letters written by him, oh, I went to this place and I've met these people and I killed these people, but I'm starting to feel bored now. I'm going to meet someone that's cool and handsome and has a bigger dick than me, so I can just get in a tussle with him. You know,
so we can just take our clothes off and oil ourselves up and wrestle. Yeah, and that's as you do. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at, is it would have taken very little additional work to kind of build up a mythos for him. Especially if they could have scattered all those writings and journals and stuff throughout a new player experience. So as you're leveling, you're getting these journals and so on. You're finding these journals written by this person, and then when you hit level 81, Captain Thick Dick of Fuck You Mountain shows up and is like, let's toss, and you have and there's a closure. There's a setup, there's a build up, and then there's a closure. It's like the third man. You finally see the guy in the shadows, Orson Welles in the shadows, and yay, right? But
you kind of had that in Mirak, but
we did a bit, and which was nice, and it's one of the reasons why people like Mirak as much as they do. It's for good reason. It's a character that they spent some time working on and explaining the motivation behind and so on. And when you actually finally meet Mirak, it's like this big knockdown fight. It's cool, but the Ebony Warrior they just kind of threw in there, and it was because and in Bethesda's own words, the designers said they just wanted a really tough guy for you to fight. They didn't have any intention to lure him up. They were just like, here's something to do.
I mean, if he is supposed to be the Ebony Warrior, which is a theory that I really do enjoy because it makes him just less silly and bland and mundane. I mean, he does kind of have some inklings, like John just said, he has the flawless gem. He also has a Daedra heart on him, and Evan was whole thing in Daggerfall was that he hated fucking Daedra. The only one that he somehow got along with was Sheogorath for some fucking reason. But, everybody likes Sheogorath apparently.
Yeah, everyone hates or Evan hates all of the Daedra for some obscure reason. But and we've got massively on Zenithar.
Well, hugely, but what are we going to do a whole cast about Evan? Come on, Jesus.
Yeah, true enough.
He's technically part of Trinimac, so it's still
okay.
Maybe.
We can stretch there if we want.
Everyone loves Sheogorath. Weeknights at 8 p.m.
No,
we can always make a cast about just Sheogorath and just shit on him the entire fucking time.
I'd be up for that.
I'll just shit on Sheogorath. Yeah, I don't know. There's good Sheogorath writing. Not much out there. It's mostly
Legends.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in Legends. There's some good stuff in ESO. Mostly it's tropes. Mostly it's memes. Which sucks. But the Mages Guild quest in ESO has some encounters that are not memey with, or meme-esque is what I mean, with Sheogorath, but most of them are pretty much just, I'm wacky and Scottish and I love cheese. And it's like...
I just dislike it because they did Shalodor really fucking dirty with that
They kind of did him dirty. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
The most powerful human mage in existence. And you made him a Sheogorath's bitch.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it man, somebody really needs to give me $50 million to build a Skyrim mod.
Just redo everything.
Yeah. Well, fuck it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, let's call it done.
I think we're there.
What are we doing
Half
next?
of this was actually about Zenithar.
Yeah, for a little while. Just for a little while. About a half an hour there, it was about Zenithar. What are we doing next? We're doing...
You said something about wanting to redo the unreliable narrator stuff.
I do, but I have a lot of like structure that I want to do to that.
Oh, okay, cool.
I really want to spend some time like really fully beating the crap out of that horse.
Okay.
And it might go so far as being like I might just do unreliable narrator plus postmodernism.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I think you and I are probably going to be the two that that spent most of that cast talking, because it's but the reason why I want to do that is because the first one we did way back X to the odd from years ago was only like 35 minutes long, and I remember thinking after we did it, the clearest memory I have of it is, wow, we didn't get to talk about half the crap I wanted to talk about. So I think we really, and then the reason why is because I want to kind of start establishing once again a baseline of where I think Elder Scrolls lore is supposed to be, and and talk about when I think it's being done right, and etc. Enantiomorph the Hero's Journey. Well, it's actually something that James and I were actually already talking about, which was the idea of doing Humpty Dumpty. Thanks for the sub. Welcome to the House of We. Was one of the things that, yeah, exactly, Doc. We were talking about doing Jung's archetypes, and I was just thinking in general it might be a good idea to just do a general sort of mythology cast about not necessarily Elder Scrolls, but more like, what elements of traditional mythology does Elder Scrolls embrace? If you're trying to do some, like, I was thinking about actually inviting, hopefully, Lady Nerevar to do help us do like a world building cast. And that would be like a kind of a thing of like, here's the aspects of mythology that are useful in the Jungian sense, and in the Campbell sense. This is why these things show up and stuff. It's just a thought.
Yeah, but in terms of the next cast,
yes,
we have reached the end of the series, but that stuff all needs prep.
Yeah.
There was some thought of doing a cast on what souls are in the Elder Scrolls, which I will have to go on.
Ooh, me too. That'd be great. Yeah. Oh, I could go for fucking hours. Yes.
Yep. Yes.
Let's do that.
Let's do that then.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Terrific.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. That's actually really good, because there's been a lot of talk about that on like various forums and stuff recently. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, great. Yep. Good plan. Okay. Cool. In the meantime, you know what we haven't done in a while? Who's working on what?
Oh.
Let's do plugs.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Okay. My thing is at the moment is Written in Uncertainty, which is steadily I originally started off thinking, well, let's ask a question in each episode that needs unpacking.
Does that go off the rails? Does it?
Not when it's that scripted.
Oh, well, okay, that's fair. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I'm starting to think, well, I could start. I'm running out of the big questions that I can quite happily spend 45 minutes talking about. So I was thinking, I like the phrase hardcore history for the Elder Scrolls.
Oh, yeah, all right.
If you've ever heard that podcast,
then
it's kind of picking a theme and going through a historical epoch over a good amount of time. And so I'm going to start working towards that once I've finished off the next list of a few questions.
Okay.
And I also have an interview lined up.
Good.
Will hopefully arrive at some point.
We've got you just recently wrapped up a series on the on
the truth sequence. Yes, I did 12 episodes on the truth and sequence, which was fun, and it's what started various conversations.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a really good analysis. That's like one episode per book. So there's a lot of meat in that.
Yeah,
it's really good.
I tried.
Where can people find it?
is at writteninuncertainty.com is the website, and it's also available on pretty much any podcast catcher you want to find. So it's iTunes, Castbox, Spotify, Stitcher, the works. Written Uncertainty is the podcast, and yeah.
IFW, do you have anything you're working on?
Who?
Do you have anything you're working on?
Oh, I was playing with my roommate's cat. Sorry.
Well, that's not a euphemism. Oh, you mean an actual cat?
Yeah, like an actual cat.
Okay, that's cool.
It's not that day today.
All right. it's Saturday.
Like, this is writing day, for God's sake. But you know me, I'm trying to still do the You Talk Mythos reboot.
The reboot.
Actually, yeah, we actually got a bunch of different things going on now. We got Tumblr for promoting some art. We been getting a lot of commission art lately. You can check out the Facebook for that, or you can see the new revamp You Talk Mythos page on USP. Yes, we're on USP.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of new text coming out. There might be something really major regarding You Talk Mythos coming out this year. I'm not for sure yet. I'm still waiting to see how that works out. Other than that, I might be doing a lore essay like the prisoner one I did on Alexia.
Oh, good.
Because I really always wanted to do something about her because she's just been criminally underused. And
Yes.
I will hopefully do enough research and won't be too tired to do that one. And then I'm still working on my actual book series that's not TS related at all on my own. And that's basically all the projects that I've been doing.
Cool.
Doing good. John, you got anything going?
I'm always working on something, but nothing I'm really publishing or sharing at this time.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Well, thanks for everybody for showing up. We'll be back. We're going to talk a lot about souls. See you then.
Yes, a lot.
Brave your Ovaltine.
Bye.
Bye.